My family has always described me with the same three words: dependable, practical, and strong. They say it like a compliment, but I learned early that it really meant useful. I'm 32 years old, unmarried, no dramatic backstory, no loud personality. I'm the one who remembers passwords, pays bills on time, and answers calls no one else wants to pick up. If something breaks, I fix it. If someone falls short, I cover the gap. Somewhere along the way, being reliable turned into being expected. Sunday evenings usually belong to my parents. Not because I enjoy them, but because skipping feels like betrayal. That night was no different. I arrived with grocery bags balanced on my arms, my phone wedged between my shoulder and ear as I confirmed a utility payment for my father. The house smelled like cooked onions and old furniture, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. My mother glanced at the bags and nodded once, already turning back to the stove. No thank you. No surprise. Just confirmation that I had done what I always did. My younger brother lounged on the couch, shoes still on, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up. "Did you send the money for the internet?" he asked, like he was reminding me to breathe. I said yes, because of course I had. I always did. The conversation moved on without me, my presence more functional than personal. I set the groceries down, lined them neatly, and tried to ignore the familiar ache that followed me into every room of that house. Dinner was loud in the way families get when they don't really talk. My mother complained about prices. My father sighed about work. My brother laughed at something on his screen. I listened, nodded, refilled glasses, and cleared plates. No one asked how my week had been. No one noticed the dark circles under my eyes or the way my hands shook when I finally sat down. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't come here for validation. I came because family was supposed to show up. After dinner, my mother wiped her hands on a towel and sat across from me. Her voice softened in that careful way that always meant something was coming. "We might need a little help next month," she said. "Just temporarily." My father didn't look up, which was his way of agreeing without taking responsibility. My brother finally paused his scrolling, eyes flicking to me with mild interest. I felt the familiar pressure settle in my chest, not panic, not anger, just inevitability. "How much?" I asked quietly. It wasn't permission. It was habit. My mother named a number, casual, almost apologetic. I nodded, already rearranging my budget in my head. Rent, groceries, insurance, their phone plan, my savings shrinking a little more. No one asked if I could afford it. No one asked if I wanted to. The assumption was enough. I was the solution. I always had been. Later that night, as I stood by the door ready to leave, my father finally spoke. "You know we appreciate you," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You're strong. You can handle things." I smiled because that was what was expected, even though something inside me felt hollow. Strength, I was learning, was just another word for silence. Driving home, I replayed the evening the way I always did, searching for the moment where I could have said no. There never was one. The road was quiet, streetlights blurring past my windshield. My apartment greeted me with stillness. Clean counters, folded blankets, the kind of order that made me feel like I still had control over something. I kicked off my shoes and leaned against the door, exhaling slowly. I didn't know it then, but that night was the last calm moment before everything shifted. Before the text message that would cut deeper than any argument ever had. Before my role in the family stopped being assumed and started being questioned. I stood there in the quiet, thinking I was tired, thinking I just needed rest. I had no idea how close I was to losing something I had spent my entire life holding together. The text came 3 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, while I was sitting at my desk pretending to focus on a report. My phone vibrated once against the wood, short and sharp. I almost ignored it. My family chat was usually noise, reminders, complaints, forwarded videos I never watched. I glanced down without urgency, expecting another request disguised as small talk. The words didn't register at first. I read them once, then again, slower. We think it's best if we take some distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely. No greeting. No explanation. Just a period at the end, firm and final, like a door being shut carefully so it wouldn't make a sound. My fingers went cold. The office around me continued as normal, keyboards tapping, someone laughing softly near the printer, a phone ringing somewhere down the hall. No one noticed that something inside me had cracked open. I locked my phone and stared at the wall, waiting for the feeling to arrive. Shock maybe. Anger. Tears. Nothing came. Just a strange stillness, as if my body didn't believe what it had just read. I unlocked the screen again, half expecting the message to disappear. It didn't. My brother's name sat above it, unreadable, like he had written it on behalf of everyone. Or maybe they had all agreed. I couldn't tell which hurt more. I excused myself early that day, blaming a headache. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light stretched, every turn too sharp. At home, I dropped my bag by the door and sat on the edge of my couch without turning on the lights. The apartment felt unfamiliar, like I had stepped into someone else's life. I replayed the message again and again, trying to find the missing sentence. The reason. The warning I hadn't seen coming. By evening, another message appeared in the chat. This one from my mother. We just need space right now. Don't take it personally. I laughed out loud at that, a short, brittle sound that surprised me. How else was I supposed to take it? I was the one being asked to disappear. I typed and erased a dozen responses. Questions. Apologies. Defenses. In the end, I sent nothing. Silence had always been my strongest language in that family. I wondered if they had finally decided to use it against me. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay staring at the ceiling, counting the small sounds of my apartment. The refrigerator humming. A car passing outside. My own breathing, too loud in the dark. I thought about everything I had covered over the years. Rent when my father was short. Groceries when my mother said prices were impossible. Phone bills, subscriptions, emergencies that somehow always landed in my lap. Distance, they said. As if I hadn't been carrying them on my back this entire time. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness behind my eyes. My phone was quiet. No follow-up. No clarification. I made coffee I barely tasted and opened my laptop, intending to distract myself with work. Instead, I opened my banking app. One by one, the familiar charges stared back at me. Their apartment rent, utilities, insurance, all tied to my name, my account, my responsibility. The realization settled slowly, painfully clear. They didn't want me. They wanted what I provided. The thought hurt more than the message itself. I closed the app and pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw stars. For years, I had told myself this was love. That helping meant belonging. That being needed was the same as being valued. The text stripped that illusion away with terrifying efficiency. By noon, my phone buzzed again. A single line from my brother. This is better for everyone. Please respect it. Better for everyone. I stared at the words until my chest tightened. Respect. The word felt hollow, borrowed. Respect had never been something they offered me. It was something they expected in return for scraps of approval. I didn't reply. For the first time, my silence felt less like weakness and more like pause. That evening, I took a walk without my phone. The air was cool, the sky heavy with clouds. I watched people pass me on the sidewalk, couples talking, someone arguing quietly into an earpiece, a woman laughing as she unlocked her car. The world kept moving, indifferent to the small earthquake in my life. I wondered how something so brief could rearrange everything. When I returned home, I sat at my table and opened a blank document. I didn't know what I was doing at first. I just typed a heading, Accounts. Under it, I started listing everything connected to my name. Rent, utilities, phone, insurance. Each line felt like a confession, or a map. I didn't know yet that this list would become the beginning of my way out. All I knew was that a single message had finally said out loud what I had felt for years. And once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. You can only decide what to do next. The list grew faster than I expected. Once I started writing things down, memories surfaced I hadn't allowed myself to examine too closely before. Each bill wasn't just a number, it was a moment. A phone call late at night. A sigh from my mother. My father saying, "Just this once." My brother promising he'd pay me back. They never did, and I never asked again. The document on my screen didn't judge me, but it didn't lie either. I stared at the total for a long time. My chest felt tight, but not in the panicked way I was used to. This was quieter, heavier. The kind of weight that doesn't crush you but forces you to stand still until you acknowledge it. I realized something then that made my hands tremble. If I stopped paying, everything would change. And if everything fell apart, they would blame me. That fear had kept me obedient for years. My phone buzzed once on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. A message from my mother lit up the screen. "You're being very quiet. That worries us." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I was tired of explaining myself to people who only listened when money was involved. A second message followed minutes later. "We raised you better than this." There it was. The familiar guilt, polished and precise. I stood up and paced my apartment, my footsteps echoing off the walls. Raised me better than what? Better than respecting a request they themselves had made? They had asked for distance. I was giving it to them. I wondered if they expected me to chase them, to beg, to prove my love by panicking. Instead, I opened my banking app again. My finger hovered over the first account. Rent. The confirmation screen glowed softly, waiting. I hesitated, not because I doubted my choice, but because I knew this was the line I couldn't uncross. Once I touched it, there would be no pretending things were normal again. I thought about all the times I had swallowed my discomfort to keep the peace, about how peace in my family always came at my expense. I tapped the screen. A small notification appeared. Changes will take effect in 30 days. It felt anticlimactic. No thunder. No dramatic release. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. I moved to the next account. Utilities. Then the phone plan. One by one, I disconnected myself from responsibilities that had never truly been mine. With each confirmation email, my breathing came a little easier. An hour later, my phone exploded with missed calls. My brother. My mother. Then my father. I let it ring. Watching the screen light up and go dark felt strangely empowering. I wasn't ignoring them. I was honoring their request. That truth steadied me. When I finally checked my messages, they were exactly what I expected. "What are you doing? This isn't what we meant. You're overreacting." Overreacting. The word burned. I typed a response and erased it. Typed again. Deleted. I knew anything emotional would be used against me, so I kept it simple. "You asked for distance. I'm respecting that. I've removed my accounts from shared expenses. You have 30 days to make arrangements." I stared at the message before sending it, my heart pounding. Then I hit send. The typing bubbles appeared almost immediately, then vanished. A minute later, my mother replied. How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you? I laughed softly, shaking my head. Everything they'd done for me had always come with a price. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat back and let the silence stretch. It felt unfamiliar, but not unbearable. For the first time, it wasn't filled with expectation. That night, sleep came in fragments. I dreamed of doors closing and opening, of standing in a long hallway unsure which direction to take. When I woke, my phone was face down on the table. I didn't reach for it right away. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched the city wake up. There was a calmness in that moment that felt almost wrong, like happiness after bad news. At work, I went through the motions. Smiled when spoken to. Answered emails. My phone buzzed constantly in my bag, but I didn't check it until lunch. The messages were harsher now. You're punishing us. Family doesn't keep score. You've changed. I had changed. The realization didn't scare me the way it once would have. Change, I was learning, wasn't betrayal. It was survival. I typed one last reply, careful and clear. This isn't punishment. This is me stepping back like you asked. Then I muted the thread. That evening, as I walked home, I noticed small things I usually missed. The way the light caught the windows. The smell of food drifting from a nearby restaurant. Life continued, indifferent to my family's outrage. And in that indifference, I found an unexpected sense of relief. Back in my apartment, I opened my document again and added a new heading, Boundaries. Under it, I wrote a single sentence. Distance is not abandonment when it's been requested. I didn't know how this would end. I only knew that for the first time, I wasn't bracing myself for the next demand. I was standing still, choosing not to run back into a role that had nearly erased me. The silence didn't last. It never does when people lose access to something they believe belongs to them. 2 days after I muted the family chat, my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my chest tightened before I even opened it. It was my aunt. Why are you doing this to your parents? They're devastated. Your mother hasn't slept. I stared at the screen, a familiar heaviness pressing down on my shoulders. The story was already moving without me. I could see it clearly, the way narratives had always been shaped in my family. I wasn't the daughter who paid the bills or kept things together. I was the cold one, the ungrateful one, the problem. By the end of the day, the messages multiplied. Cousins I barely spoke to suddenly cared deeply about my choices. Family friends reached out with concern wrapped in judgment. Every message carried the same tone, disappointment disguised as love. No one asked what had led to this. They only wanted to know why I had stopped. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened social media, something I rarely did anymore. My brother had posted a photo of our parents' living room, half empty, boxes stacked against the wall. The caption read, "Some people forget where they come from." The comments were full of sympathy. Heart emojis. Messages praising his strength. I closed the app quickly, my hands shaking. 4 years I had been invisible. Now, suddenly, I was unforgettable. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, trying to slow my breathing. This was the part one had always feared. Not their anger, but their ability to turn others against me. To rewrite years of quiet support into a single act of cruelty. I wondered how many people would believe them. How many already did. My phone rang again. This time, it was my father. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "What is this?" he asked without greeting. "People are talking." "I'm aware," I said quietly. "You've embarrassed us," he continued. "This could have been handled privately." I almost laughed. Privately, Like the text that told me not to contact them at all? Like the years of private sacrifices no one acknowledged? I swallowed the words and chose restraint. You asked for distance, I reminded him. I'm respecting that. There was a pause, then a scoff. You know that's not what we meant. I closed my eyes. Then you should have said what you meant. He didn't answer. Instead, my mother's voice came through the line, tight and emotional. How can you sleep at night knowing we're struggling? The old version of me would have folded right there. Apologized. Promised to fix it. I felt her rise inside me, instinctive and desperate. But I didn't let her speak. I'm not responsible for managing your life, I said softly. I never should have been. The line went quiet. Then it ended. I sat there for a long time after, phone in my lap, heart racing. I expected regret, panic. Instead, I felt a strange clarity. This was what it looked like when I stopped participating in the version of me they needed to survive. The next morning, a new message appeared from my mother. Your father's blood pressure is high. Is that what you want? I stared at the words, anger flaring hot and sharp. Fear weaponized into blame. I typed once, erased it, then typed again. I hope he's okay. But I won't be pulled back with guilt. I sent it and blocked the number. That was the moment the narrative fully turned. The messages grew crueler. Accusations replaced concern. I was selfish, heartless, ungrateful. Someone even suggested therapy, like boundaries were a diagnosis. I didn't respond. Each insult confirmed what I already knew. If I had stayed quiet, nothing would have changed. One evening, a friend from work pulled me aside. Hey, she said gently. I saw something online about your family. Are you okay? I nodded, surprised by the lump in my throat. I will be. She squeezed my arm. You don't owe anyone your peace. That small kindness hit harder than all the accusations combined. It reminded me that not everyone equated love with sacrifice. That outside my family, care didn't come with conditions. That night, I sat at my table and reviewed the confirmations again. Accounts closing, payments ending. Each email was a step further from the chaos. I realized then that the backlash wasn't proof I was wrong. It was proof the system had depended on me staying quiet. Before bed, I wrote another line under boundaries in my document. When they lose control over you, they will try to control how others see you. I turned off my phone and lay in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of my own breathing. I had been afraid of becoming the villain in their story. Now, I understood something important. I could live with being misunderstood. What I could no longer live with was being used. By the end of the week, the noise began to change. It wasn't louder, just different. Less panic, more calculation. My family had moved past shock and into strategy. The messages slowed, but when they came, they were carefully worded, almost polite, as if kindness might lure me back faster than anger ever could. My mother texted from a new number. We don't want to fight. We just want our family back. I read it without reacting. Family back meant payments restored. It meant silence in exchange for support. It meant me stepping neatly into the space I had always occupied. I didn't reply. Instead, I set my phone down and focused on the rhythm of my morning. Coffee brewing. Sunlight through the window. Small, ordinary things that felt newly precious. That afternoon, I met my friend Leah for lunch. She listened without interrupting as I explained everything, from the text message to the backlash to the guilt that still curled in my stomach at unexpected moments. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me. You know what's strange, she said. You're the calmest I've ever seen you. I considered that. She was right. I was tired, yes, Hurt, definitely. But underneath it all, there was a steadiness I had never felt before. I think it's because I stopped arguing with reality, I said quietly. That night, I made another decision. I blocked the remaining family numbers. Not forever, I told myself. Just long enough to breathe without flinching. My hands shook as I did it, but the fear passed quickly, replaced by something like relief. Days turned into a week. Then 2. The constant vigilance I had lived with for years began to fade. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I slept through the night. I noticed how much energy I had been spending anticipating other people's needs, bracing for emergencies that were never truly mine to solve. One evening, I received an email from the landlord of my parents' apartment, confirming the account transfer. The responsibility was officially off my name. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed my laptop and let out a laugh that surprised me with its softness. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Of course, the peace didn't come without echoes. Sometimes, guilt crept in when I least expected it. In the grocery store. In the quiet moments before sleep. I would hear my mother's voice in my head, my father's disappointment, my brother's accusation. But then I would remind myself of the truth. I hadn't abandoned them. I had stepped out of a role they refused to question. One afternoon, I started therapy. I sat across from a woman with kind eyes who asked me a simple question. What do you feel responsible for? The answer came too quickly. Everyone. She nodded, like she had expected that. And who feels responsible for you? The silence that followed was heavy, but honest. I left that session with a strange mix of grief and clarity. Grief for the years I had spent earning love through obligation. Clarity about what I would no longer accept. A few days later, my brother left a voicemail from yet another number. I didn't listen to it. I deleted it without hesitation. That, more than anything, showed me how far I had come. The old me would have listened, dissected every word, searched for an opening to fix things. This version of me understood that not every call deserved an answer. I started filling my time with things I enjoyed, not things that proved my worth. Long walks. Books I had put off reading. Quiet dinners where no one asked me for anything. The absence of constant need felt unfamiliar at first, almost lonely. Then it started to feel like freedom. One night, as I sat on my couch watching the city lights flicker outside my window, I realized something that made my chest ache in a different way. I missed the idea of my family more than the reality of them. I missed who I hoped they would be, not who they had shown themselves to be. Accepting that felt like letting go of a story I had been telling myself my entire life. I opened my document again, scrolling past the lists and notes I had created over the past weeks. At the bottom, I added another line. Loving people doesn't require sacrificing yourself. I closed the file and turned off my laptop. The room was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something new. Space. Choice. Possibility. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for my family to decide my place in their lives. I was deciding my place in my own. And that decision, fragile as it still felt, was the most honest one I had ever made. A month passed without a single message from my family. At first, the silence felt sharp, like a missing tooth I kept touching with my tongue. Every quiet moment made me wonder if this was it. If I had finally been erased. But slowly, something unexpected happened. The silence stopped hurting. It softened. It became space. One Sunday morning, I woke up late and realized no one was waiting on me. No reminders to send money. No emergencies disguised as casual texts. I made breakfast just for myself and ate it slowly at the table instead of standing at the counter, multitasking out of habit. The simplicity of it felt indulgent. I hadn't realized how rare it was to do something without calculating how it might affect someone else. That afternoon, My phone buzzed for the first time in days. My chest tightened automatically before I checked it. It was a message from my mother. "We think enough time has passed. You should come over and apologize so we can move forward." I read it twice, surprised by how calm I felt. There was no acknowledgement of the text that had started everything. No apology. Just an invitation wrapped in conditions. I set the phone down and stared out the window for a long moment, letting myself feel whatever came up. What I felt wasn't anger. It was clarity. I picked up my phone and typed carefully, choosing honesty over softness. "I'm open to talking someday, but not if it starts with blame. I won't apologize for respecting a boundary you asked for." I sent it before I could second-guess myself. The reply came quickly. "You've changed. You used to care about this family." I exhaled slowly, then typed one final message. "I still care. I just don't disappear for it anymore." After that, I muted the conversation again. My hands were steady this time. I didn't feel the urge to explain further or defend myself. I had learned something important over the past month. Closure doesn't come from convincing people to understand you. Sometimes it comes from understanding yourself well enough to stop asking. That evening, I met Leah for dinner. We talked about work, about a movie she wanted to see, about nothing particularly heavy. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me and smiled. "You seem lighter," she said. "Not happy all the time. Just freer." I thought about that on the walk home. Freedom hadn't arrived as a dramatic moment. It had come quietly, in the absence of constant fear, in the realization that I could survive being misunderstood, that I could build a life that didn't revolve around fixing what others refused to take responsibility for. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. My mother's handwriting filled the envelope. Inside was a birthday card, weeks early. There was no apology, only a single line written in careful script. "We hope you find peace." I smiled sadly and placed the card in a drawer. I didn't feel the need to respond. Peace, I had learned, wasn't something anyone could give me. It was something I chose again and again, often in small ways that no one else would notice. Life settled into a new rhythm. Workdays ended without emergency calls. Evenings were my own. I started planning things just because I wanted to, not because they were expected of me. I began to imagine a future that wasn't shaped by obligation. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Sometimes, I still missed my family. Grief doesn't vanish just because you understand it. But missing them no longer meant returning to the role that had broken me. It meant accepting that love, when it costs you your sense of self, isn't love at all. One night, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different. Not dramatically, but noticeably. My shoulders were lower. My expression softer. I looked like someone who had stopped bracing for impact. I thought back to the text that had started everything. "Please stop contacting us completely." At the time, it had felt like rejection. Like the final proof that I wasn't enough. Now, I understood it differently. That message hadn't broken me. It had revealed me. It had forced me to see a truth I had been avoiding for years. Distance hadn't destroyed my family. It had shown me where I ended and they began. I turned off the light and crawled into bed, listening to the quiet settle around me. It wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Because in the absence of their voices, I had finally learned to hear my own.